All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Spiritual View. It is Monday, April 17th, I believe. And I'm here with my beautiful, lovely co-hosts, Kim and Sheila. And today we are going to be talking about something that might feel a little triggering for those of you that are listening live or on the replay. And the reason for that is actually because we're going to talk about triggers. So I'm super, super excited about this. So before we kind of dive in and get into the nitty gritty, because some of this can be stuff that we don't necessarily want to discuss, let's just do a quick check-in. And I just love to hear how both of you are doing and how your weekend was and all the things. So Kim, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm over my jet lag, I think. And, I came back from my trip not only renewed, but really focused and intentional on how I was going to be and live when I got back. And it's all going really well. So I got to hold on to that and keep going in that direction. But I'm doing fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. And Sheila, how are you doing?
Yeah, I had a great weekend. It was fulfilling. I spent a lot of time teaching yoga, which I love to do. And I also, I'm creating a space to do my healing work in, a specific space in my house. So kind of got a lot of that lined up. It's almost ready to go. So I'm excited about that. Spent some time, creating and teaching.
Awesome. Beautiful. I had a busy weekend as well. Actually, I'm in the middle of an 11-day group container that I'm facilitating right now called Sourced. And so I always notice that when I do these consecutive day group containers, that number one, I have to be really mindful to manage my energy because I'll start to get a little tired and fatigued. And there's also this really interesting dynamic that as everyone else's triggers and stuff is coming up, that of course mine will also come up. So then I'm having to navigate both ends and really work to stay in a place of neutrality. So that's kind of what I've been working through, which is a perfect segue to this idea of triggers. And so as we start, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on just what is a trigger. Like if someone has never heard the word trigger, and I feel like it's a pretty common word in the metaphysical community, but just in case, how would you explain that? Like I know for me, a trigger is anything that holds an emotional charge for you, right? And not from the place of, oh, I feel joyful, right? It's that often we notice it's the emotional charge when we go into the more negative emotions or the more denser energies, right? Is that there's something there that's kind of like pushing our buttons in a way. And so I'm curious to see if that's the same way that both of you see it. So Kim, what would your kind of explanation or definition be about that?
Thank you. I love talking about this. I could talk about this for days. And I think in our society, like so many words or topics, we're just conditioned to think it's this certain way, and that's what it is. And for the most part, it seems to be a negative thing, right? Like trigger is one of these words that people hear the word triggered. It's just like, they already start to react when it's just a word. I love Dr. Gabor Mate's explanation of a trigger. And what he says, and I'm not saying this word for word, but my understanding what he says is, a trigger is basically a sensation in your body that is showing up to direct you to something that needs to be healed or addressed or changed. And I love that. So when I think of triggers now, I think of that is my opportunity for growth, for healing. And that's all it is. So it is a very, very good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah, I love that. I often, when I work with my clients and I work in my group containers, I tell them, I say, when you get triggered, get really fucking excited, because that's the information that you need to move the needle in your healing or to go on to the next, level up in your journey, so to speak. Sheila, what are your thoughts on it?
I love both your explanations. And I would say, just to add to that, is for me, it's a huge resistance. The word resistance would be big for me. So when I'm feeling myself triggered, I feel myself not wanting to hear what the other person is saying, not wanting to digest it, not wanting to go there. I have resistance. And when I find myself in that resistance, I honestly make myself stop and look and examine it, because I guess I'm lucky enough, I guess we're all blessed enough to understand that triggers are for us, not against us. Even though they don't feel good, they feel like resistance. They're definitely for us.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think you have a recent experience of that. Which is kind of why we're going in this direction today, if you'd like to share that.
I'm a yoga teacher, so I was teaching a class, and the word that I used in telling a story, lots of times I weave stories into my classes, and the word that I used was this experience that I had by meeting a minister. And so I used the word minister in class, and I had a student come up to me afterwards and said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And she explained to me that that word was very triggering for her, and that in fact, she wasn't going to come back to yoga because yoga should be a safe space and she shouldn't be triggered. And my immediate response was, "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I shouldn't have used that word. I should be more sensitive. Thanks for bringing it to my attention." And I immediately felt less than. I felt like I had done something wrong, and I had intentionally done something wrong, which is absolutely the opposite of the truth.
Mhm.
And so then I had to go see why I was put into that place of being defensive and trying to defend why I would say it. And, I didn't mean it that way. I was just tripping over myself trying to explain myself, which is absolutely ridiculous, because the more I tried to explain myself, the more she got set to the point that she was going to not come back to yoga. So I had to analyze it afterwards and go there. And I realized something very, very interesting was that her response to that word has nothing to do with me,
Mhm.
had absolutely nothing to do with me. And her response is her opportunity to go look at that and find out what that is and why it does trigger her. And I really didn't serve her by trying to take it on for her.
Mhm.
I did the opposite of helping her heal, because it's not my job to help her heal, but it's my job to be the best I can be. So the next time I'm in that situation, I have an understanding that it's not mine. And I don't need to try to trip over myself to explain it myself, because my intentions are always from love.
Mhm.
I don't ever remember a time when I was trying to harm someone or trying to create a space of unsafe in the yoga studio, for sure. And so I have to go back to my understanding of who I am in that, and recognize that, yeah, it's those triggers that come up for us. If we're trying to project them onto someone else, that other person does not have to take them. And that other person was me, and I was trying to take it on.
Mhm. And I think that there's a part of us, and like I don't want to speak for any, but just like generally, like we've been conditioned to apologize. Right? Like I feel like we like as society, we apologize way too much, right? Like if you happen to try to go in the same door as somebody, it's like, oops, sorry. Like excuse the fact that I exist or that I'm taking up space, or right, because we don't want to be judged, or we don't want to be viewed as, being harmful or hurtful or whatever, when in a lot of cases, in this one, for example, what really was required is for her to take responsibility for her own shit. Right. But yet, and I find it, and we can talk about this too, like it's an interesting role to be in when you are a teacher or a facilitator in some way, shape, or form. And so, Kim, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I agree with Sheila on, I think for the majority of people, the first response is to resist. That's what we're taught.
Mhm.
Resist, right? Avoid. I don't want to listen. I don't want to hear. I don't want to see. I don't want to deal with this. And then coming back to the responsibility piece, we're all mirrors for each other. All
Yeah.
of us are going to trigger people, and people are going to trigger us. This is a part of life. We're never going to avoid that. We know we have no control over anything outside of us.
Mhm.
Sometimes the things we do or say can influence what's going on outside of us. But the only thing we have control over is what we experience inside. So we are 100% responsible for ourselves, our experience, everything. We give that power away though, right? And we blame others for our internal environment. We put the expectation on others to improve or fix our internal environment, when the only one that is actually capable of doing that is ourself. And I agree, it is not my responsibility, your responsibility, anybody else's responsibility to do someone else's work. We can help if someone asks us, but they got to do their own work. And here's the thing, even if Sheila were to, and I wasn't saying this is the thing to do, but for an example, if Sheila were to, as she did, go out of her way to try to, make the situation better, if that person is not willing to take responsibility to heal, it isn't going to make one damn difference. It's not going to change anything. That person has to be willing to take responsibility.
Mhm.
And this is something I've been practicing so much, even for myself lately. I mean, when I did Dr. Gabor Mate's training a few years ago, that's when it really became aware for me. And since then, I've been practicing this more and more. And what I find is that's where the freedom comes from.
Mhm.
That's where we find freedom from suffering, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, by taking responsibility. And just as you had mentioned, it was not intentional.
Mhm.
Sheila didn't choose any certain words. And I don't think anybody ever chooses any words intentionally to hurt another person. It can appear that way a lot of times because people are responding, especially not your situation, Sheila, but I can think of other situations where maybe people get in an argument and trigger each other. People say things out of fear, out of a need to feel safe, or because they are in resistance. But I wouldn't suggest that there is intention to harm somebody else. It's more the intention to protect the self, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Mhm.
And, whether it's two people involved or three or a group, each person has to take responsibility for how they respond. And my practice lately has been the awareness piece, recognizing what I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for, and being responsible, and moving into that place of acceptance, letting go, and learning the lesson. And I just want to share quickly, it's interesting. I didn't even do this in conjunction with our topic today, but I posted a quote earlier this morning on my Facebook that I came across that just described everything that I've been feeling lately, and I'm going to share it. It says, when you're finally ready to heal and create the biggest positive shift of your life, you'll begin to see everyone as your teacher, especially those that trigger you. And
Mhm.
I love that. And I can even think back to before I was doing this work, when I was in corporate world working in municipal government, and everybody can relate to this. We've all had bosses or coworkers that just trigger us. We get very negative feelings about them. And I can think back, and what those people taught me is the type of person or the type of leader or the boss that I didn't want to be. And that can be just as great of a teaching as, say, a really good leader teaching, in my mind.
Mhm.
Everybody is there to teach us something. And if we let go of the resistance, we're going to learn a lot more. We're going to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like too, like when it comes to something like this, it can start to feel a little like it's obviously uncomfortable when we're in that trigger, right? Our entire body reacts, which is how we know we're triggered in the moment in the first place, generally, right? Whether we feel angry, we feel slighted, we feel attacked, we feel defensive, what trauma can come up, whatever that is, right? But I also feel like for me, often the experience is also multi-leveled, like things are not always what they seem. And so I'm actually just realizing I have a really good example of that just happened on Saturday, and I didn't connect the dots to this when we started this either. But so Saturday morning, I was in my group container, and it's a container. There's 26 other women there. And there's a couple women in there that I also have personal relationships with. So they know more about me than the rest of the group. And they've seen me move through and have to work through a lot of the different things in my own journey. Right. And I was telling this story in this group, and to preface it, one of the group agreements, if you will, is that we are not coaching or giving feedback to each other. And the reason for that is that if somebody is in the group and they're being vulnerable and they're sharing, and someone comes in, even if it's with the best of intentions, and says something like, oh, well, why don't you try this or try this, in an effort to try to help, it can sometimes energetically cut their process and the catharsis, and cause them to kind of go like this, because then they're like, oh my God, someone's giving me advice, and it wasn't invited in. Does that make sense? So I was teaching the class, and I was sharing a very personal story, and I was doing it very carefully so that no identities were known. But I was sharing this very personal story about me and a relationship that I have with a friend, that we had to navigate and work through from the perspective of, there was this, it was kind of like there was this power over power dynamic going on, where it was like I could never, come up to meet this person or to rise above. Therefore, I was always staying below. And it was a bit of a a glass ceiling that I had to break through on a lot of different levels and layers. And of course, with as much love and compassion as possible, this person and I are still very good friends. I don't mean it like I was like, fuck you, get out, or anything like that, right? But it was a very interesting process that I had to go through. And as I was telling the story about this process, one of the things that came out of my mouth was, and it made me feel XYZ. And as soon as I heard myself hear it in my mind, I heard the correction of, she didn't make you feel it, right? That was my own experience and my own choice, right? Take responsibility for that. But when I also checked in, I was like, do I need to go back and explain that? And the response was no, just leave it there. For whatever reason, someone else needs to hear it or whatever, like, don't worry about it, keep going, right? And one of the things that I had to really work through over the past couple of years to get to the point where I'm doing the work that I'm doing now is this fear I had of being a facilitator or a teacher and saying the wrong thing, right? Or doing the wrong thing or upsetting someone else, right? And I had to get over a lot of that. And what happened was I made this comment, and this person who is also has a personal relationship with me dropped in a comment and said, can we reframe she made me feel to I felt, or something along that line. She basically made the correction that I had heard in my head, right? But when she did that, I became triggered as fuck. And there was so much that came in. I was, number one, I was embarrassed. I was fucking mortified. And I started having feelings of like, you could have come to me in private. You didn't have to drop it in a group for everybody to see, making me wrong, I guess, or at fault, right? Because it was triggering the fear that I had held for so long. And then as I sat into it more, I was like, okay, well, was she commenting from a place of her own triggering because she knows the background behind this? Or was she just, just trying to help? And was she crossing a boundary, because giving feedback is an agreement. We have all of this stuff, but that trigger, it's still actually like, I'm getting heart palpitations as I even share it. And I guess maybe it triggered like this, old programming of like, who am I to be teaching someone or to be sharing this work or to be doing, and so that self-doubt crept in. And I've been sitting into it and trying to look at it from all different angles, right? But it was a very, very interesting experience. And Sheila, do you have something to say? Because then you're like,
well, I find it fascinating, first of all, because it is, it's something that I'm working through right now at the same time that you're working through. So I find it interesting that we're both going through the idea that we could say something wrong in our teachings, first of all. And I think we're being called to a higher place of commitment to our teachings. And I would say that we are in a place where we have to look at where we're not offering ourselves fully. By you saying that, you're offering yourself fully. By you making mistake, by you saying that whatever you feel it's a mistake, right? So by you doing that, you're offering yourself fully to your class, to your students, and you're giving yourself with your whole heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of the things that came up too, is I was kind of like, as I was sitting, I was kind of like, fuck, give me a break. Like, I'm only human. Everything that comes out of my mouth isn't going to be perfect because I've got my own shit, right? And so like, there's so many different conversations that I've had with myself about this. It's fucking fascinating is what it really is. Kim, what are your thoughts?
Okay, I think of two things. First of all, I've had situations too recently where and I like to use the word perception a lot lately, because, we can all have a different perception on what's happening. And there's no right or one truth. So my perception is, over the last several months, I've definitely triggered some people. But what I've been doing is thinking to myself, okay, good. If I am a spiritual coach and a coach of other things, and this is my work, then I'm doing the right thing, especially if I'm allowing them to choose to either, face it and move through it, or, if they're going to be in resistance, and respect their choice and not let it affect me at all. Anytime that I do perceive that I've triggered someone and then I feel triggered, sort of like Sheila's experience, what I'm doing is looking inwards and going, okay, what can I find out about myself? And I've learned so much about myself in the last few months. And what I've done is recognize, it all is opportunities. And what I'm finding is the more I do that, the quicker I'm moving through it. And the quicker I'm moving into that place of letting go of the resistance, moving into the acceptance. And, some people may perceive that as not giving a shit or I don't care. But for me, I feel like that's the compassionate approach. If I have triggered you, it's not intentional to cause harm. But if I have, you know what, I'm excited for you, because here's an opportunity for you. And what you do with it is your choice. And whatever you decide, I'm going to respect that. It's not going to affect me because it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to look at my own shit and what can I learn from this, or what can I practice from this? And like I said, I'm having a whole new experience, and it's all very good, very freeing.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I think that, like with my situation specifically, and there's still some stuff to work through, I'm recognizing, because as I tell the story, like I start to feel like almost like anxiety. But for me, I think it is like, number one, I recognized it in my head before anybody else said it, right? And so I was following my guidance. And I also trust, sometimes I know that the things that are said a certain way in the container are said, there's an intention behind it, because it's going to unearth something for somebody else. Right. And sometimes that somebody else is going to be myself. Right. But the other, aspect of that too, is it's bringing forward what I would almost in a way see as like the next level of who I am and what I'm here to offer. And in my business, from the perspective of, and it was so funny because I was just talking about this on day one of this container, is that if we want to receive more money, more, abundance, more whatever that is, we have to be willing to receive everything, not just the stuff that we want. So if I want to create more, I have to be willing to receive everything that comes with that, even if it's a judgment or a criticism. Right. And even more so, it was kind of like, the twist of the knife, because it wasn't a complete stranger. It was someone that I know. Right. So it was not that I want to call it a test, but it was interesting. It was like, okay, if this is where you want to go, here's some of what you have to, be ready to experience as well, because it's not always just going to be, a bed of roses, if you will. Right.
It feels like there was a lot of opportunities for a lot of the people there,
Yeah.
For different lessons. And like I said, for me, it's all about practicing the new awarenesses, or the new responses that we're becoming aware of. Right. I can think back to probably 15, 17 years ago. Maybe, I hope I didn't share this story already, but this is before I really got in. I wasn't even a yoga teacher at this point. I was still deep in, fear and ego and all of this stuff. And I would say I probably had pretty severe FOMO at the time. I had to be a part of everything, right? Looking back now, I know it was that need to feel heard, to belong, and then to fit in and all of that. And we were at a conference for my work, and I was with some coworkers, and one of the girls was talking about how she could sing all the words to I Like Big Butts by Sir Mix-a-Lot or something. Anyway, we were kind of laughing. So we said, okay, well, sing this song. And so we're listening to her, and I'm at that point like a squirrel, right? Like I can't miss out on anything. And someone else we knew came in, and my attention went to that person. And my other coworker called me out on it, like right in front of everybody. Like, Cam, that is so rude. And I went, oh my God. Yeah. And I was so embarrassed. I felt bad, like genuinely felt bad. But I am so grateful. And I think of that all the time. I'm so grateful that happened, because I was able to have the opportunity to change, because I didn't realize what I was doing. Right. But I was unable to hold my attention to one person. And ever since then, it can still happen, because it's our human nature. But I know if I'm in a conversation with someone, especially if there's a room full of people, I would try my hardest to stay focused on that person, that conversation, and not be distracted by what's going on outside of me. But had that never happened, I might still be doing that today.
Yeah.
So I've learned to really appreciate those uncomfortable, shitty experiences, because they have brought the greatest lessons for me.
Yeah.
So I welcome them now, and they still feel yucky, But when I welcome them the way I do, the yuckiness doesn't stay, and I can let it go and move forward. And if the other people in the situation choose to attach and hold on, that's their choice. Attachment's suffering. I don't want to suffer.
Yeah.
Not doing it anymore.
Yeah, I love that. Sheila.
I found myself in that situation where I was being triggered, obviously. I found myself, the biggest lesson for me was trusting who I am. And I think that I don't trust who I am. And I've been working through that all my life. I don't trust my abilities. I don't trust my greatness. I don't trust a lot of that. And this was just a subtle reminder to come in and say, you're still not trusting yourself in the yoga room. I've been teaching yoga for, I don't know, 15, I don't even know how many years, a lot of years. I love teaching, but I do find myself when I'm teaching, is this the right thing to say? Will this harm anyone? I'm thinking of that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's time for me to trust I know what to say. I know not to teach with any harm.
Mm-hmm.
And until I figure that out, I think these people are going to keep coming to me and showing me. She was just doing her job, showing me that you don't trust yourself. You're going to give your power away in a hot second. You know, someone's going to question you and you're going to give your power away. And you're going to feel bad for what you did when you had no bad intention at all.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm taking on the idea that something about me was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how quickly I gave away my power. So my opportunity in that is to really wake up and really find who I am and why would I do that? Why would I give my power away so easily and take on someone else's stuff?
Mm.
So that was my learning. That was my wisdom that I gained. And I think, Tracy, for you, I think it's going to make you the most amazing, you already are an amazing teacher, but I think it's going to make you move into your greatness even more because heck yeah, you're human.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said that, what was behind it? Can people give you the freedom to offer that message and know what was behind it?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, what's interesting about it too, is I firmly believe that, everything is happening for me, right? I think we all here believe that, right? And I can remember times too, I remember a teacher that I had one day looking at me and it was really kind of random and bizarre. And it was one phrase that she said to me, but it fucking stuck with me for years until I decided to deal with it. And one of what she said was, "You're not creative." And it was something that at the time I was like, yeah, you're right, I'm not creative. But then when I got to the point in my journey where I was required to be what I would be considered creative, then it was one of the biggest blocks to me being able to step forward as a healer in my business, because I had the story running of you're not creative, right? And so even though when we have these conversations with people and the language isn't always perfect, or it comes back to that place of, number one, there never was any ill intent most of the time, right? And there's a purpose that it was said the way that it was said, right? And if we can kind of step outside of the trigger, right? If we can move through the emotions and then get to the place of neutrality and really start to sit into the questions of, okay, why? Why is this coming up for me? Right? So if I go to my example, why is this coming up for me? Because I recognized it as soon as I said it, and I could have corrected it before anything got dropped in the comments, but I didn't, because when I checked into my intuition, it was like, do I need to go back? And it was like, nope. So I didn't. But I trusted that. And then I received the trigger, right? And the trigger being, or the lesson being, that I have to be okay with any judgment or criticism or perception or point of view that might come my way, no matter who it comes from.
I think it's hard for teachers sometimes. I know I struggle with this, and I've gotten better, but I can still be triggered. I think sometimes we think that, or we forget that students can be teachers too.
Yes.
Right. And I just want to come back to something that what Sheila was saying before. And I think you also shared kind of a very important lesson there, Sheila, and it's the importance of, not changing who we are to try to soften someone's trigger or to help them move through it, right? Stand in your truth. You got to be compassionate to yourself as well as to the person. and that's why so many of people lose themselves, right? We're so, I don't want to act this way or be this way or say this for fear of upsetting someone,
Mhm.
right? But if that's your truth, be who you are. If somebody takes offense to that, that's their own choice. It's not something that you're projecting onto them per se.
Yeah.
So I think there's an important lesson in that as a reminder to just, when we're ourselves, we're authentic. That authentic self is the place that comes from love. You
Mhm.
can never have any intention to cause harm when you're your authentic self coming from a place of love.
Yeah. And the authentic self also is imperfect, right? Why? Because we're here having a human experience. That's the point.
We're here to learn, we're here to grow.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is recognize that others who are triggering us too, it's not intentional. We got to remember that. We're
Mhm.
perceiving it that way. And
Yeah.
maybe step back and consider other perceptions.
Absolutely. Like, and that was one of the
First
questions
initial
I
one.
asked, right? Is it was like, was that comment being made from their trigger? Right? Because that can come as well, right? Just like Sheila's example is that, that conversation with that student was coming from her place of wounding and her place of trigger, right? And it just so happens that inadvertently and from a neutral space, you push the button.
Yeah.
But sorry, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say, I would suggest that probably for the majority of people, the first response is an ego response.
Mm.
And if you just take the time to check that, you'll move forward in a better way.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sheila, go ahead.
I'm going to say I can guarantee these situations won't come up for me once I stand in my truth, once I'm authentic in my teaching. So it's coming up to show me that it's time for me to step up, because I don't want these situations. I don't want these triggers. No, I don't think anyone does. Nobody wants to feel uncomfortable. I'm not saying that there's other triggers won't come up to show me other things, but this is one that's come up a few times. It's come up in my life with my family. It's come up in a lot of different ways. And I think it's time for me to really understand that I'm not responsible for your feelings. I am absolutely not responsible for your feelings. And my intentions are always from love. Whether or not you perceive them as that is your choice.
Yeah.
If you're seeing me as doing something as harmful and meaning to be harmful, that is your choice. And I think until I really get that and I really stand in my truth in that, someone else is going to come up and I'm going to trip over myself and apologize and do the same thing again.
Yeah.
This reminds me sort of I'll share a personal story within my family even. And I was the type of person before in even my current marriage and previous relationships where, if the other person I was in a relationship was upset or I sensed they were withdrawn, right away, I'd always think it was my fault. What did I do? What did I say? And what do I need to do or say to fix it? Right? Always. I was like that for years. And then I started to change, right? I started, going on this deeper spiritual journey and waking up. And I realized that was not the case. And it was interesting because where I had that big shift and that really clear awareness of this was a time when my husband had changed jobs for a period of time. He had a lot of stress and he was he was just not in a really good energy, which is so not like him. And old me would have thought, what did I do? What's happening? And I remember him coming home one day and he said, I'm sorry, I've been such a dick lately. And it just came out of my mouth without even thinking it. I said, don't apologize to me. I'm having a great day. Apologize to yourself. You're the one that's having a shitty day. And we kind of just looked at each other, but I was like, wow, that is so true, right? And that's when I think I really realized that I'm not responsible for you. And I don't have to allow what you're going through to impact me. That was such a powerful moment for me. And I think of it a lot. And it's so true. But we tend to, like you said, give that power away, right? We allow or rely on others to determine whether we're having a good day or not. Whereas we can make that choice. It's simple.
Yeah, I love that. And that's actually a really good example because, for those that have partners or that live with more than one person or whatever it is, right? Like, I'm sure you can think back to several experiences where someone's come in the door, whether it's your kid or your spouse or whatever that is, and they come home and they're in a shitty mood, and then what happens, right? And it can be like a kind of thing, right? Where now you're like, oh, why are you being a dick to me? And why are you, you end up in this big thing, just because we take it personally, right? One of the 4 agreements, don't take things personally.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit extra work to try to stay there, but if you do, it's probably going to resolve a lot quicker. You meet it with the same energy, right? We know it blows up, it gets worse.
Yeah.
And life's too short. We should enjoy it. That's what we're here for. I think that's our purpose, is to just enjoy this life.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
How did we get to this place as humanity where we're looking to others for our freedom? I don't know. Like, it's interesting. Did we get conditioned this way? Did we get conditioned to think that other people what if we taught children from day one that, that person said this to you, but that's their own responsibility? What if we taught children right from the get-go? Wouldn't that be fascinating to see what would happen in our world?
Yeah,
because I was obviously trained that I was responsible for everyone else's feelings around me. Somehow I conditioned myself into that space. And it's not serving me. It's uncomfortable. It's not serving me. It's not serving the people that are coming to me with their triggers. It's not, I didn't serve that person by trying to apologize, and I just dug her more into her idea that I did something wrong, and what's the point of that?
Yeah. I wonder too with kids, like I see it in my teenagers even, right? Is that when I look at what the emotional need underneath that is it's a need to belong, right? It's a need to feel safe. It's almost, I don't like the word validation, but it kind of feels like validation in a way.
Yeah. That could be a whole other show, parenting.
Totally.
And meeting the basic needs. Yeah, I think, we're so far off track and so conditioned that this is the way things are, right? And not to get too far into it, but we're told that this is the terrible twos. But like you said, Tracy, there's a need not being met, whether it's not feeling safe, not feeling heard, not feeling belong. And those are the things that create behaviors which still show up 20, 30, 40 years later.
Yeah.
And create our traumas, right?
Yeah.
Some of our greatest traumas, I think, are in those early childhood years where those needs aren't met. And it's not intentional. It is not intentional, right? You only know what you know. I'm the first one to say, if I knew 25, 30 years ago what I know now, I would have parented way different. Way different. But my intentions were good. I did the best I could. And you only know what you know.
Yeah. And there's where that self-compassion comes in.
You know better, you do better.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so the moral of the story now, like to wrap it all up, is that triggers are purely information. And so the more that we can embrace them and, work through them, and then, take kind of a bird's eye view, I suppose you could say, from a place of neutrality, the more that we will learn, the more that we will grow, and the more that we will also release. Anything?
The thing that comes up for me is when we learn to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, we'll start to become comfortable everywhere.
I like that.
I'm just going to leave it at that.
Beautiful. Yeah. Sheila.
The world is full of opportunities for us to let go of this patterning. We've just given different stories of how we've been patterned to respond and to feel suffering and anxiety and stress over what we've said or what we've done. And we have conditioned ourselves to live that way. And the only way to not do that is to decondition ourselves. And hopefully this YouTube channel is helping others so that they can see where they're being conditioned and where they're living their life conditionally.
Yeah, I love that. And, the other thing I would say too, is when you go through a process like this, where you're moving through a trigger, you're taking time to feel the emotions, work through the emotions, release some emotions, and then ask the questions and see what is the lesson or what do I need to know here? Like, Heck, I celebrate you, Sheila, for being willing to look at that and being honest about that. And then you came and talked about it on YouTube, and that's the part I think that we forget, is to celebrate that we've actually navigated that and that we've been able to take away something for self on the other side. Right? Like I'm celebrating the fact that, okay, well, I'm not going to quit this container or quit teaching just because I was, embarrassed, or just because I was triggered, or whatever that is. And so, I think the beautiful thing we can leave everybody that's listening to this live or on the replay with is at the end of that, it's not okay, this happened, now I need to beat myself up over it, or I need to feel bad about it, or I need to feel shame or guilt about it, but I actually need to feel really good about it. And I need to celebrate myself as I let it go and recognize that I am absolutely exactly where I'm meant to be in my purpose and my mission and in the path of my soul.
It makes me think of, I think there's a quote or an image where it talks about, like a plant or, a seed. It has to go under pressure and break until it grows into something, right? Mm-hmm. And the references to us as humans, it's the same thing. The more we sort of break and go through the discomfort, then we can start to bloom.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also how diamonds are made, right? Our diamond's not made by pressure. Right. Yeah. So we have this beautiful diamond in the rough, so to speak, that comes out of everything that it contracts and creates pressure. Yeah. All right. Beautiful. Any final words from either of you before we bid adieu for today?
My final words would be, the more that I become liberated and the more I find this freedom, the more others around me will probably have the opportunity to do that as well. We think we're doing this work for ourselves. Yes, of course, that's where it starts. Mm-hmm. But when we start to respond in a way that's free of conditions and free of being embarrassed or all these different, this shame, all this stuff, mm-hmm. It gives others a place to look and watch and see that they can also live without that as well. This is not something that is for Kim and Tracy and Sheila. This is something that is meant for the world, for us to wake up to know that we can be our greatest selves. And that means that we don't have to feel shame and embarrassed and that I've done something wrong when our intentions were pure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah. Anything else, Kim?
Just embrace your triggers with gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Yep. When they show up, get really fucking excited because there's something amazing on the other side of that. So with that said, thank you to everyone for joining us live as well as on the replay. Please feel free to, of course, watch this episode and then go over to our Facebook page and continue the conversation over there in the thread. We'd love to hear your points of view around triggers, as well as what your experiences are and anything else that you might feel called to share. So thank you so much. And we will see you all next week, same time, same place. Here on the spiritual view. Bye.